30 seconds and counting. 25 seconds and counting. We are still go. 20 seconds. Guidance alert. The guidance system now going internal. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening to my viewers in Africa and Europe, and good afternoon to the majority of my viewers in the Western Hemisphere. Good morning to my viewers in the Pacific Rim, and welcome to the Angry Astronaut. We have some interesting stuff that's been happening today, in addition to the topic tonight. But before we get to that, where is everybody checking in from, please? Let's go ahead and we got Isle of Palms, lovely place in South Carolina, place that I've been a number of times in the past. Hello, Roswell, New Mexico, and hello to Anton Nim. Really appreciate you joining us today. Hello, Denmark. Thank you very much from joining. Rest in peace, Boeing, and it sucks liner. Yes, indeed. Well said. Let's see. We got Luxembourg. Hello. In Hong Kong. We have New York, South New Jersey. Yes, a Falcon booster. Rest in peace. New Hampshire, Washington State, Denmark, Hailing Island. Hello, Tampa and Antwerp, Belgium. We have New Hampshire, Long Beach, California, Palm Coast, Florida, Panama, Hailing Island. Hello, Chile. We have Oklahoma and Texas, Oklahoma City, that is. Hello, Denmark. Polish person, I guess, checking in there. We have San Antonio and Oxfordshire, McPherson, Kansas, and also Colorado Springs, my hometown. Hello. Norway, Bergen. Hello. And Moldova. And we also have Arkansas, Alabama, Pennsylvania. Hello, Mars, Manchester, Hailing Island, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Alaska, Queensland. Thank you very much for checking in today, everyone. Welcome again to the Angry Astronaut. It's a bit hot in my flat today. It's a still day here in Britain, and as anybody who lives in Britain knows, people don't believe in central air in this country. Central air is something that is seldom needed, and so nobody really makes use of it. Real quick, hello, Stockholm, Sweden, Venezuela, Belgium, and Hamburg, and Northeast England, Chippewa Falls. Hello, and once again, thanks very much for joining us today. So we are going to be talking about the Polaris Dawn mission that should have flown today, was rescheduled due to weather issues, at least initially, but now there may be some complications. We had this landing failure, and even though when I reported on it today, I did not begin to think that the FAA would begin to care about a landing, but it appears that they've opened an investigation. And investigation may again put at least a temporary moratorium on flight. Hard to say. And once again, that suggests, and this is something I'm getting from Scott Manley, by the way. I have not received direct confirmation from the FAA on this. I'm about to, as soon as I'm done with this live stream, I'm going to send an official request for comment from my contacts at the FAA. But Scott Manley never says anything unless there's something to back it up. And he's also says that this may have an impact on future flights for a little while. So this is unexpected. And it could be that something happened with this landing that's a little bit more serious than it appeared. In other words, It appeared there might have been an engine fire immediately after the landing happened. You could see things starting to burn as it started to topple over. Once again, you can't be sure. That's just all speculation. But if it was some kind of engine fire, then an engine failure of some kind could have an impact on future flights, and the FAA may want to know exactly what happened with the engine before they let any more rockets go. Again, that is difficult to say. I don't think this is going to delay things for very long. I really doubt it, assuming that there's any sort of significant delay, but still kind of shocking. Kind of shocking that this happened. If a producer, just so you know, there are folks who are asking me to show the footage right now. We didn't anticipate that we were going to be talking about this tonight. However, producer, if you happen to have the footage of the of what happened with the booster and you want to post it here, just go ahead and it looks like we have a link. Oh yeah, we have a link there as well, or we're going to put a link on there for you guys to look at it. Yeah. All right. If there's anybody in the team that can provide producer with a link to what happened, he's going to go ahead and post the footage for us here. So guys, just bear with us, and someone on the team's going to go ahead and send the necessary link to the producer, and we'll get that up for you here shortly. But is that going to have a long-term effect on Polaris Dawn? I doubt it. It might push things out a week or so, something like that. I doubt it's going to have, any more significant impact, because again, SpaceX will simply say that this isn't going to present any sort of danger to the public, because keep in mind, it doesn't matter if it might present a danger to the Polaris Dawn crew, believe it or not. The FAA has no jurisdiction over the crew of Polaris Dawn, or even a NASA crew for that matter, because under the provisions of an experimental license, it allows crew members who are flying on spaceships to be put at risk without FAA approval, as long as they sign an informed consent. There's some footage for us here, so we can see what happened here. So we got the landing coming in.
Stage 1 landing lane.
As I say, from what I'm seeing, I see a fire before I see things totally topple over. Let's see. Burning. To me, it looks like it's burning before you see it topple over, and then boom, it blows up. To me, it looks like something was on fire before the toppling process really began. Again, hard to say for certain. And again, this is just all speculation, but if it was an engine problem of some kind, an engine problem here could be duplicated somewhere else. But again, I really doubt that, because this is a booster that flew 23 times, for God's sake. These engines have been used over and over and over and over again. We've got to expect that wear and tear on these engines. It's just, you can't compare what's happening with this booster as opposed to a booster that's going to be taking human beings up, which won't have been put through near as much wear and tear as this particular booster. So I really doubt that this is going to be a significant issue, but I'm going to get more details from the FAA, and I'll let you guys know as soon as I have more information. In the meantime, let's talk about Polaris Dawn. Now, the main thing that I kind of want to discuss is, how dangerous is this going to be? Because there's a lot of discussion about that right now. What sort of threat might this present to the crew members on board? And keep in mind, of all four of these people, Jared is the only one with spaceflight experience, and none of these people have any spacewalking experience, which generally doesn't happen on the ISS these days. Usually you have one person leading a spacewalk who actually has experience, and then anybody else participating in the spacewalk, they kind of follow their lead. Very seldom do you have a situation where nobody has experience in spacewalking. The way that used to be back in the old days, this is kind of duplicating what happened with the Gemini flights, the kinds of some of the same risks that were taken during the time of Gemini. So let's talk about ISS real quick. And this is from a space.com article. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station spend most of their days in the relatively safe environment of the orbiting spacecraft, but occasionally astronauts must face the deadly rapture of space for hours with only the thin protection of their spacesuits between them and the frigid vacuum. Spacewalks were indispensable for the space station's assembly, of course, and over 2 decades later, spacewalks remain crucial components for the enormous spacecraft's continued maintenance in low Earth orbit. So, although spacewalk is a jazzier name, of course, we know that these are actually called EVAs. Compared to how often an astronaut performs other tasks, spacewalks are, of course, quite rare. They're expensive, they're time consuming, and most of all, even today, they're dangerous. Astronauts usually operate robotic arms like the Canadarm2 to remotely work in the harsh thermal vacuum of outer space. They use the Canadarm, and they use robots to do a lot of their work. But sometimes, of course, robots alone are not going to do the trick, which is why they carry out these types of spacewalks. Years before astronauts ever perform an EVA in space, now these are NASA astronauts, they begin training in the Neutral Buoyancy Lab at NASA's Johnson Space Center. So, of course, all of us have seen that, the underwater training that all NASA astronauts go through. And by the way, this is similar training that these astronauts have gone through as well, the 4 who are on the flight. The astronaut trains for approximately 7 hours in the pool for every hour they might spend walking in space. I would say in the case of the Polaris Dawn astronauts, they probably spent even more time doing that. Underwater, the astronauts practice connecting electrical cables, removing broken equipment, and everything else they'll be doing in space, all while learning to work within the constricting suit. And once again, this is an advantage that the Polaris Dawn astronauts are going to have, as they're not actually going to be called upon to do any sort of fine, detailed work while they're carrying out this spacesuit. But squeezing out of the hatch on the real ISS is not the same as floating in the massive training pool. Quote, there's no diver floating around to keep you safe, according to NASA astronaut Tracy Caldwell Dyson, who has performed 3 spacewalks. Along with the ISS, spacewalkers cut through space at on the ISS, they're cutting through space at 28,000 kilometers an hour. First of all, there's no air and there's no wind and there's no sensation of speed whatsoever. Quote, you and the other person in the puffy white suit are the only 2 out there in the vacuum of space, and you tend to hang on a little bit tighter. Now, most spacewalks, including this one, are performed in pairs. So far, there's only been 1 3-person EVA. Now, to be clear here, and by the way, John, thank you so much for the tenor there. I really do appreciate it. You guys' help is coming in at especially good time right now. And for the same reason that I always talk about, guys, it's just getting worse and worse on Google. As a matter of fact, as far as monetization is concerned, this is going to be the worst month that I've had since I had 10,000 subscribers on this channel. It's ridiculous as to how pathetically creators are getting compensated by advertisers these days. We're being called upon to get support from so many other sources. It's really annoying to me. But in any event, you guys' help is always deeply appreciated. So once in orbit, preparation for the spacewalk starts days before they go out into the void. The astronauts prepare by checking every part of their suit, of course, and their tools, making sure they're assembled and tethered properly. Now, about 24 hours before the spacewalk, astronauts undergo decompression, the same procedure that divers follow when returning from the depths of the ocean to the surface of the water. Inside the space station, air is pressurized to the same degree as it is on Earth at sea level, 14.7 pounds per square inch, or 1 atmosphere. However, inside a spacesuit, it's only 4.3 psi. Now, not sure what the psi is inside a SpaceX spacesuit, but it's probably pretty similar. The same pressure experienced at approximately 30,000 feet or 9,000 meters above the Earth, experiencing a rapid drop in pressure from 14.7 to 4.3 psi, causes nitrogen bubbles to form in the bloodstream, and you get the bends. I think most of us know about that. So as a result, you have to go through this gradual decompression procedure in order to be able to use. I'm sorry, go ahead. Please repeat. It's 5.4 psi, so a little bit more on the SpaceX spacesuit, which is interesting, but still a huge, huge drop off from what normal pressures would be. So, Rodney, thank you so much for the $20 New Zealand. Really, really appreciate it. With so much debris in low Earth orbit, is it worth risking unnecessary spacewalks just to prove a point? Andrew, that's a very good question. And I'm going to try to answer that here in just a moment. So again, under ISS procedures, they go through this decompression while they're in an airlock. There's no airlock on the Crew Dragon, meaning that the entire spacecraft is going to have to be gradually decompressed, and the astronauts will get into their suits after this process is completed. All 4 of them, of course, because the entire interior of the Crew Dragon is going to be completely decompressed at that point. Now, there are other differences about the spacesuits that the astronauts on the ISS wear as opposed to what Jared and his crew are going to be wearing. And that is first of all, they have a life support backpack to provide the necessary atmosphere for the spacesuit, etc. That is not something that these suits are equipped with. They don't have their own self-contained life support systems. Instead, they're going to be connected to a life support system via oxygen hoses, that sort of thing. And by the way, also a really big consideration, and one of the reasons why there was such a delay in getting this mission going, is they're going to be fed pure oxygen during this process. Very high oxygenated content in the atmosphere inside the suit, and there was concern of extreme dryness existing inside the capsule, and especially during this decompression process, and therefore a potential risk of fire, which would have been absolutely cataclysmic with that much oxygen present. And so they had to change a number of things about the ship design in order to minimize the possibility of that fire taking place. So a lot of unique dangers. Also, the spacesuits that the ISS astronauts have a limited degree of self-mobility. And again, that is something that these suits will not have. But on the other side of the equation, the spacewalkers, Jared and his crew, are not going to be carrying out as risky of a spacewalk as ISS astronauts do. One of the big differences is, even though the pictures that we've seen, the early pictures of the Polaris Dawn mission, show an astronaut tethered to the Crew Dragon and floating free out in space, that is actually not going to be happening. There's a piece of superstructure that's built onto this Crew Dragon that the astronauts will be holding on to the whole time. They'll be tethered to the ship too, but in addition to that, they will have that extra point of control, that extra point of attachment to the capsule itself. They'll never be floating completely free out in space, which it is a very good idea, because with all of the early spacewalks that the Soviets did, that the Gemini astronauts did, it was determined that trying to control yourself under those circumstances out in space is a very difficult thing to do and very, very risky. Elliot, thank you so much. Really appreciate your first ever super chat. I'm honored that you decided to support me here. Love the incisive commentary. Thank you. Really do appreciate that. I try to be as detailed and as thorough as I possibly can with these things. So here's the differences. All right. There's an article in another article that was put out in regards to the safety of this particular mission. Quote, and this is something that Jared said. I mean, an absolutely extensive amount of time has gone into it. This is during a press conference that he gave at Kennedy Space Center. It's rightfully, why would it be the riskiest part? It's because you're throwing away all the safety of your vehicle, and it comes down to your suit being your spaceship. Now, the other individuals on this, by the way, are Scott Petit, who is an experienced pilot, and then Sarah Gillis and Anna Menyon, who are SpaceX employees who do have a fair amount of space training related experience. But at the same time, none of these other three people have ever been in space. And none of these four people have ever been on a spacewalk. So we're talking all four of them are novices. But at the same time, it's not like that's never happened before either. Obviously, there had to be a first person to try this out in the past. And in the case of the Soviets, it was it was Alexei Leonov who carried this out on his own. So, you know, it's not like this is unprecedented, but at the same time, very unusual to have a spacewalk with absolutely nobody who has any real experience. So that'll be very interesting. By the way, this spacecraft called Resilience is the same spacecraft that Isaacman flew for the Inspiration 4 mission. Obviously, it's had modifications made, including the ability to open up like a clamshell, essentially, so that the astronauts can emerge. So you have also, the hatch has an array of hand and footholds that will be used when he and Gillis make their trip outside the Dragon. So once again, those two will be emerging out into space. And again, this will be the first time that we have a private spacewalk taking place. And one would assume that Jared Isaacman is going to be the person in charge of the spacewalk, because that's how they do it on the ISS. There's always one person calling the shots during the process. Again, because there's no airlock, the ship is exposed to the vacuum of space, which means that Petit and Menyon are going to be in vacuum inside the spacesuits as well. Now, here's one of the reasons that this is important as to why they're doing this. It's not just for a thrill, although I'll tell you, Jared Isaacman is a thrill seeker, and I think that's one of the big reasons that this is happening. But it's also to test these new SpaceX suits. They absolutely need to be tested in the vacuum of space, because the intention is to ultimately use a future version of these. This is still an early model of the spacesuit. Again, doesn't have its own built-in life support systems. It has a number of things that a regular spacesuit should have that it does not yet have, but still they're testing these suits out in space, and that's going to be extremely important. Now, here's something else that Isaacman said about the process. When we're out there, we are going to make use of various mobility aids that the SpaceX team has engineered, and it'll look like we're doing a little bit of a dance. What that is we're going through a series of test matrices on the suit. And the idea is to learn as much as we possibly can about this suit and get it back to the engineers to inform future suit design evolutions. And the mobility and structure he's referencing is something that I've talked about before. It's called the Skywalker, something outside the hatch that the duo will use to complete their maneuvers safely without floating free. And when asked why not to do that full float away, like the famous photo of the first American spacewalk with astronaut Ed White on June the 3rd of 1964 on Gemini 4, Isaacman and says safety trumps such emotion, and either hands or feet will be engaged with the Skywalker at all times. And that follows safer parameters such as those performed by Buzz Aldrin on the Gemini 12 mission from November 12th through the 14th, 1966. Looks cool, inspirational, which is always part of every one of these missions. But I think we want to learn from history on this one and try to always maintain at least one point of contact with the mobility aid, he said. So it's not going to be exactly as pictured in the early promotional illustrations for this mission. Instead, you're going to maintain some contact with it. Let's see what else. And it's not lost on us, goes on Jared, that it might be 10 iterations from now and a bunch of evolutions from the suit, but that someday someone might be wearing a version of what we're wearing now and might be walking on Mars. It feels like a huge honor to have that opportunity to test it on this flight. Now, this is supposed to be taking place on day 3 of a 5-day mission, and it will be after the Inspiration mission has carried out its extremely elliptical first orbit of the Earth that will carry the crew all the way out into the Van Allen belt, further away from the Earth than any astronauts have traveled since the time of the Apollo missions, further away even than any of the Gemini missions, and significantly, the two female astronauts, these two ladies from SpaceX, they're going to travel further away from the Earth than any woman ever has. And the reason that that's significant is we're going to have two youngish women who are going to be blasted with radiation inside the Van Allen belt. And as nasty as that might sound, it's extremely important that we learn the kind of impact that interplanetary radiation and the radiation of the Van Allen belt is going to have on the female body as much as it has on the male body. We have no information on that. Granted, sure, women have been exposed to radiation before, but not the type of radiation, the unique kinds of radiation that exist out in the Van Allen belt, most significant of which is our cosmic rays. So even though I have to admit, if I were one of these ladies' fathers, I'd be a little hesitant. Give me a little pause to think that my daughter was going to get blasted with an unknown amount of radiation, especially if they intended to have children sometime in their future lives. But at the same time, more power to them for taking this kind of risk, because it is relevant. It's not just a thrill-seeking thing. I'll tell you, that's one of the biggest reasons that Jared is doing this, even maybe not in his own mind, but it really is. The guy is an amazing thrill seeker, and he wants to go someplace that nobody else has ever gone. He wants to do something that either very few or no other human being has ever done. And this is definitely one of those kinds of people. So if there are any problems with repressurizing, then the EVA suits are going to be, they're going to be worn. They're going to be essentially the astronauts' lifeboats, and they're going to make an emergency return to Earth under those circumstances. So yeah, it's interesting. And they've done a lot to try to prepare for anything that may come up. Quote, We have spent so much time drilling contingency responses, drilling all different flavors of responses that we might need to have on the spacewalk. I actually think we've used up all the ideas that I had at the start of this that I might want to drill. And that's actually Gillis, she's actually in charge of spaceflight training. So I think that she, of course, a good person to head up these safety drills and this preparation. So, I mean, yeah, this is a space tourist kind of thing, but it's also an extremely it's an extremely big deal, a very big deal indeed. I mean, we have a lot of these sorts of things have never happened before, events taking place on this mission. And there are quite a number of them that are significant from a scientific and space exploration perspective. And said before, the radiation issues. Also, testing Dragon's heat shield under more extreme circumstances, because the velocity of Crew Dragon is going to be up a bit because of the nature of the initial orbits that they carried out before the orbit stabilizes. So yeah, all this is going to really change a lot. Also, another detail, another thing that they've done in order to try to keep everybody safe. Peter Stoyanov, thank you so much. We need to stop it with the Pepsi can single hatch models and start building real spaceships. Yeah, that's a very good point. We definitely, when that's what Starship is. Starship is the step up from Crew Dragon, definitely. But another thing that they're doing, for those of you thinking about space junk, meteoroids, that sort of thing, they are carrying out this spacewalk with the Crew Dragon oriented in such a way that it's acting as a big shield, a big barrier between the astronauts and incoming space debris, meaning that the risk for any sort of suit tear from a piece of space junk or a micrometeoroid is going to be very, very, very minor. A very good point. It likes even a fleck of paint in low Earth orbit. Yeah, it's definitely dangerous when you have anything, no matter how small, colliding with somebody in orbit. But actually, in my opinion, the risks that these astronauts are taking as far as space debris and micrometeoroids are concerned are actually going to be less severe than the dangers that the ISS astronauts are carrying out, because they're going to use Crew Dragon as a big shield to intercept those pieces of debris. So I think that danger is going to be relatively minor. And also, they're going to use Crew Dragon as a sun shield too. They're going to do everything they can to make sure that the astronauts are never actually staring full on into the sun during this during the spacewalking process. And not to say, once again, that the suits can't handle it. They have sun shields. They are definitely rated to be in full sunlight, but they are doing everything they can to avoid a scenario to where the astronauts might inadvertently ended up getting blasted with sunlight when they're not prepared for it. So they really are taking lots of precautions, the kinds of precautions that generally aren't taken on most spacewalks, because this isn't a regular spacewalk. This isn't an ordinary spacewalk. These are all private citizens. These are all novices to the spacewalking process. These are all people taking a very big risk with their lives right now. I mean, do I think that this is probably going to go right? Yeah, I would say that their odds are very good. I would say the odds of a successful mission are very, very good. But at the same time, 100% no. 99.9% no, I don't think so. I don't think they're that good. I might give them more like 98%, 99% maybe, and even that might be a little optimistic that nothing serious is going to happen here, because this is a risky thing, and that cannot be overstated. Peter Stoyanov, thank you so much. As for an episode on companies trying to commercialize space debris clearing services on a functionally large scale, yes, indeed. As a matter of fact, I was planning an episode like that. And just to be clear, the other way to do this, to get your ideas recognized, besides super chats, is to become a Patreon member for $3 a month. That's it, $3 a month. And then you can suggest videos whenever you like. And some of those videos may be Patreon exclusives. And let me tell you, it doesn't matter what level you are. I mean, if you're Starship level, I guarantee that your video will be made at some point. But I have made videos for Patreon members from the bottom to the top. So definitely the space debris, that's definitely an episode that I want to make, because, and a big reason why I'm here, by the way, in Europe, because the Europeans are really taking the lead on trying to clean up low Earth orbit and to carry out space sustainability. They are definitely the leaders on the planet when it comes to those types of initiatives. So I hope that gave you some interesting information on this upcoming mission. We, of course, wish Jared and his crew all the best on this incredible experience. I won't say that I'm not envious, because certainly there's a big part of me that would love to be on this mission. But at the same time, I have to say, if I were given a decision, given the decision to change places with one of these people right now, I probably wouldn't do it, because I'm not sure if I'm really up to that kind of challenge, let me tell you. Thanks again for tuning in. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, please consider supporting this channel on Patreon and PayPal. All the details in the description. And as always, stay angry about space.